Welcome back to a slice of news where I cut you off a slice of news. The president's $14 million renovation of the reflecting pool on the National Mall that was supposed to leave the water looking blue has in fact resulted in some pretty green looking water. The president promised the nation that he would have the reflecting pool looking American flag blue, and it would only cost the American people $1.8 million. But after he awarded what was essentially a pool cleaning company a no bid contract to do the work, the cost ballooned to nearly 10 times that initial claim to around $14 million. And once the work was done and the money was spent, the reflecting pool looked pretty much the way it did before, maybe a little bluer. But before long, even that look didn't last. The reflecting pool's waters became greener and greener until the president, who had run on draining the swamp, essentially had constructed one right outside his house. The formerly clear waters of the reflecting pool turned a sickly green, the culprit being an overgrowth of algae. The fact that the reflecting pool is essentially a giant basin full of standing water exposed constantly to sunlight makes it the perfect breeding ground for algae bloom. Though to be fair, in the administration's defense, the issue of algae in the reflecting pool has been something plaguing it since it opened nearly a century ago. But since they claimed, quote, President Donald J. Trump is an expert builder who has fixed the reflecting pool for good, unlike the failed and extremely costly attempts by Obama and Biden. And the way it's looking now looks neither like the work of an expert builder nor fixed for good. They don't get very much credit there. Especially since with a $14 million renovation, they could have taken some sort of proactive steps to prevent a known issue. But the administration was quick to spin it not as negligence on their part, but rather the result of residual algae that had been in the supply lines that had been left unused for several months during the reflecting pool's renovation. Even if you could pin the blame on the current green waters on the temporarily disused supply lines feeding in residual algae, the real issue is they didn't have a plan in place to address it before the algae returned, especially since this was supposed to be some sort of victory over the previous administrations, showing how much better this president was dealing with the reflecting pool than they had been. Instead, what we have now is Park Service employees dumping bottles of hydrogen peroxide into the reflecting pool to try to get the algae under control. The way the administration tells it, they are the first administration to really take care of the reflecting pool in recent memory because the previous two Democratic administrations completely dropped the ball on it. But unsurprisingly, that's not entirely true. In 2012, President Obama massively renovated the reflecting pool, including installing a new water supply system that included ozone water filtration, a more reflective coating to the bottom of the reflecting pool, and even replaced the old dirt tracks around the pool with paved sidewalk and installed lighting for nighttime viewing. And while it is true the Biden administration didn't do a whole lot for the reflecting pool in the decade after that Obama-era renovation, I would argue that during his time in presidency, Biden had a lot more important things to do than worry about algae mitigation in a reflecting pool. I would also point out that in the time between that 2012 renovation and today, there was the first Trump administration between Obama and the current Trump administration. So if he wanted to be the hero of the reflecting pool, he could very easily have done something during his first term, which he did not. And yes, the fact that President Obama spent 2 years and $34 million on that massive renovation of the reflecting pool, and we still are now stuck with a green reflecting pool just like we were in years past, is disappointing. I don't blame him for that. Yes, it seems like it took more than an ozone water filtration system to permanently correct the issue of the algae. It not having done so is not proof that the entire thing was pointless, and Obama should be blamed for the fact that it is not fixed on a permanent basis, especially since clearly this administration hasn't managed to do that either. Blaming Obama for the state of the water, especially after it's been almost a decade and a half since he did anything about it, and a full decade since he was even president, makes it an absolute absurd thing to do. But doing absurd things and blaming Obama whenever possible is what this administration is known for. The reality is neither Obama nor Biden caused the algae in the reflecting. And Donald Trump very obviously did not make it go away. The reality is that the algae in the reflecting pool has numerous potential causes. The water that fills the reflecting pool comes from the tidal basin. Water that itself is already prone to algae. So obviously, if you're pumping in algae-prone water, there is a higher risk of developing algae within the reflecting pool. Adding on top of that, it has been incredibly hot in Washington, D.C. in recent months, with the temperature topping around 90, sometimes for an entire week, and a lack of rain to cool things down a little bit has made the water in the tidal basin the perfect breeding ground for algae blooms. The hot summer time is just the time for algae in the lakes and reservoirs around the area and around the world. And it's only become worse as global warming has raised global temperatures, making algae blooms everywhere grow even faster. So trying to frame the previous issues with algae in the reflecting pool as some sort of evidence of disrepair and negligence is false and disingenuous. But by that same token, I can't blame the current administration for the green algae water either. It's just something that happens around this time of year in the tidal basin. The problem I have is not that the water turned green with algae. It's that the administration blames everyone else. It's the supply line's fault. It's the previous administration's fault. The real issue isn't that there is an algae problem. It's that the administration doesn't want to just take ownership of it and responsibility for it, and instead want to pin the blame on anything but themselves, while trying to paint themselves as better than all the previous administrations when it came to the reflecting pool. The fact that it's been an issue for nearly 100 years, and even now is still being dealt with, proves how tenacious of a problem it is, and how hard it is to solve despite numerous attempts to at least mitigate it. Even if previous Democratic administration had done more to deal with the algae issues in the reflecting pool, it likely still would be something that the current administration would be having to deal with today. Because as I said before, when you get down to it, there's really no getting around the fact that the reflecting pool is essentially a large pool of standing sun-warmed water, as big as several Olympic-sized swimming pools. This was always going to be an ongoing issue, because that's just the reality of a body of water of this nature. And really, that's all this administration had to do, is say, look, this is something that we've been working on for a very long time. It's an issue that has many different factors, and we're doing our best to try to make it look good during this time of peak algae blooming. And I'd say most of the American public would be pretty understanding because of the known history of green water in the reflecting pool and what causes it. But of course, that's not what this administration does. They want to act like they are the greatest, most caring administration ever for the reflecting pool, and no one has done more for the reflecting pool than they have. And if there's something wrong with it, it was someone else's fault. It was probably Obama, not us. It's that arrogant, self-congratulatory attitude that I take issue with, not the green water itself. If they were going to spend $14 million of our tax money to essentially paint the bottom of the reflecting pool blue, they could have spent some of that $14 million on some sort of additional water filtration if they're going to just complain about how inadequate the Obama installed system was. As a result, despite the fact that the algae blooming in the reflecting pool and turning it green was a natural process not entirely within their control, the way they sold their beautiful renovation and how they denigrated the previous administration's attempt at keeping the algae at bay, it feels like the entire thing was a complete waste of money. While it was certainly over expensive considering it was supposed to cost only $1.8 million at the start, it didn't have to be seen as a complete waste. But when you sell everyone on beautiful blue water and deliver them murky green water, that's exactly what it feels like. And if one wished to be charitable, you could cut the administration some slack, since a lot of this green algae water is not anything they could have controlled to a degree that it would look beautiful and blue for our nation's 250th birthday. But they oversold and underdelivered in that department, so I don't really feel a need to be, and I know they never would be if this was a different administration experiencing the exact same problem. Instead, what we have is a reflecting pool that looks like a giant tub of lime Jello, an administration that doesn't want to take responsibility for it and in fact would prefer to blame the other administrations for something that neither of them really had any great control over. I guess when you get down to it, when you trust the swamp monster to drain the swamp, all you really end up with is more swamp. And the reflecting pool has become a reflection of this administration's true colors, both figuratively and literally. Alright guys, that'll be it for this episode of A Slice of News. I've been your host, Mr. Slice. Until next time, when I cut you off, another slice of news. And don't forget to rate and review the show on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you find it.